We are going to talk about the early years of World War II and Hitler's strategy as he kind of goes into this and builds power. We've talked about it a little bit, but then we're going to talk about how he really messes up with his invasion of Russia in Operation Barbarossa. And then we'll get into Pearl Harbor, which is, kind of in the next couple of sections also. But in the early years, the first couple of years of World War II, that's not really the beginning of Hitler's rise. So if you have to look all the way back to 1933, when he becomes Chancellor of Germany, he is democratically elected Chancellor of Germany. He definitely democratically elected, but by that point he had put together a group known as the, kind of like the brown shirts almost, but like these people that were working the polls and making sure you voted for Hitler. It had gotten to that point in a lot of ways. And the unemployment and some of these things that were really hitting Germany hard allow him to kind of be elected. And he is going to continue to gather power and continue to rearm Germany, which was illegal according to the Treaty of Versailles. You can see here a machine gun being assembled. And then you have Hitler going through the crowd at the factories, and people are enthusiastically greeting him because they hadn't been able to work because these factories have been shut down. And again, they're very, very desperate to have some kind of economic progress, even if that means breaking the treaty that they had, signed, and very blatantly breaking it. I mean, they were not allowed to build guns at all in Germany, and they're building machine guns and tanks and stuff. But it's his rhetoric that really gets people on board with what he's trying to do. And then we kind of talked about the idea that in March of 1936, German troops are going to march into the Rhineland. The Rhineland was a region of Germany that was basically, they said, you're not allowed to have any troops or any military equipment in this section of land at all. And he said, negative, Ghost Rider, I'm just going to march my troops in there, and I'm not going to do it at night. I'm not going to do it on the sneak. I'm going to march troops in there in broad daylight and just say, hey, what are you going to do about it? Right? There's literally he told people he was coming. There's crowds of people, children, that show up in the middle of the day to just like say, hey, look, the German army, look, we're back. They're excited because Germany had basically become like the bottom of the barrel in Europe. So they're very, very happy that this is happening, and they're excited, and they are hopeful that, they're not going to get, they're not going to get put in the toilet anymore, basically, in Europe. Not only, is he just blatantly ignoring the treaty, he's basically saying, hey, nobody's even going to try and stop me. And when nobody does try to stop him, that just emboldens him even more. And we talked about that when we talked about appeasement. So then in 1938, Nazi Germany annexes Austria. So again, they just go to another country and they're like, hey, you're going to be part of Germany now. The Treaty of Versailles said, hey, Germany, you're not allowed to annex anybody. And they're like, how about Austria? And they're like, definitely not Austria. And they're like, oh, we already did. What are you going to do about it? Nothing. And so this is certainly an escalation. Again, you can see that there's just rows of Germans just marching in, and they're being greeted with great enthusiasm because the Austrian people are there and they're saying, hey, Hitler says that things are going to get better, and why not? And plus they've got this big army. I guess we'll just let them take over us, Now, he was already starting to talk about some of these crazy ideas with the Jews and some of this stuff, and people were like, man, that doesn't sound like that's going to go well, but, times are hard right now, so let's just roll with it, right? So he's gone and taken more land than he's supposed to, and then, as we said before, you get to 1939, and you have the invasion of Czechoslovakia. This is in an area known as the Sudetenland, and European leaders had basically hoped that this is the last thing the Germans are going to do. So once they remilitarize the Rhineland, they retake Austria, they annex Austria, they invade Czechoslovakia. Basically, Germany, that's what Germany was prior to World War I. So you understand that, like, basically, Germany had basically got to the point where before World War I, where they had expanded and invaded further, that's where they were at before. So everybody else is like, that should be it. They're back to where they were before World War I, you know, that should be all they're going to do. But hey, don't do anything else, of course. But now they basically just allowed them and Hitler to just take as much as he wanted. It's not going to work out well, clearly, because Hitler is not going to be appeased. He's going to want more and more and more because he's a megalomaniac. And so fast forward a few months, and it's going to just continue to escalate from there. August of 1939, Hitler was actually kind of politically smart. He knew that in the First World War, one of the biggest problems they had was fighting with Russia. And so he goes and he makes a secret pact with Russia. And they basically say, we won't attack you and you don't attack us. Smart by Hitler. Hey, biggest problem is trying to attack Russia. We don't want to do that. We're just going to take care of everybody else. We don't want to fight Russia. Now, in the back of his mind, Hitler knew he was lying because he wants to dominate the entire globe. He's never going to be satisfied unless he takes everything. But he's saying, hey, I won't attack you. You don't attack me. Everybody else is a bunch of wimps. They're not going to do anything about it. Stalin is like, okay, well, we're trying to do this whole communism thing over here anyways. Great, whatever. Let's do it. So they promise, hey, here's what we're going to do. Well, the USSR says, well, we need some more land to grow food. And Hitler says, well, I need some more land too. And they say, okay, well, let's split Poland in half. You get that half, I'll get this half, and it'll be fine. Stalin's like, cool, not a problem. This is going to be a beautiful relationship, right? And the problem is that basically, as soon as they decide to split it up, Hitler's like, just kidding, we're going to take all of it, which instantly is going to trigger that non-aggression pact and make it void because Hitler's crazy. It was surprising because they were kind of natural enemies. Their political ideologies don't match up at all. Fascism and communism are basically complete opposite ideas of how government should run. So a lot of people are surprised by this, but they do sign it, and you know, they're saying, hey, you do your communism thing, and we're going to take over the rest of the world. So the next month, Germany's going to invade Poland, and this is clearly the moment that the war is going to be on. The non-aggression pact from Russia basically allows Germany to march into Poland completely unopposed because in the Treaty of Versailles, Russia was supposed to be the one that was protecting Poland. And now that Russia said, do what you want, Germany just marches in and takes Poland for themselves. And this is obviously, Britain and France are like, hey, Russia, aren't you going to do anything? And Russia's like, oh, no, we're not, actually. So Great Britain and France are like, well, we'll rescue Poland. No, you won't. You suck. The British and the French get their teeth kicked in. And so basically, Hitler invades Poland on September 3rd, completely takes control of it. He invents a new war method called blitzkrieg, where basically you just send as many soldiers and tanks and weapons and airplanes into an area, and you just take it by shock and awe. That's what we called it, like in the Iraq War, where we just like blew up the entire city of Baghdad. It was like shock and awe. We're just gonna just blow them up, and he basically that's what he does. And then you have, you know, the lightning warfare, where you have just people, hundreds and thousands of planes just trying to annihilate the enemy as fast as possible and taking huge swaths of territory as fast as possible. And all at the same time, anybody who disagrees with you're going to arrest them and put them in concentration camps and work camps, essentially. And that's basically the beginning point of the Holocaust. But they're really trying to concentrate their territory, take as much as they can. The Polish army sucks. They did nothing. They basically gave up no resistance at all. They go, hey, the Germans are coming, and the Polish army is like, okay, let's go get them. And then they get on their horses to go meet the German army. And the Germans are in tanks, and they just run over the horses. Like, that's all you got? Bro, like, the Germans just, it's absolutely embarrassing. And so, I mean, they just have nothing to do. Great Britain starts to bomb Germany, but by this point, they've already taken Poland, and there's nothing they can really do. And now that they've taken Poland, and then Russia's over there going, hey, you stay over there and we're good, now they can turn their attention to Great Britain and France. They invade the Netherlands. They use blitzkrieg tactics again to attack France and the Netherlands. Great Britain and France were taken so by surprise that I want to say that within like a month they had already captured Paris. Like, it was so bad that they drove the British and French army out so fast. It was just 6 weeks, right? And there's a movie called Dunkirk. Have any of y'all ever seen Dunkirk? It's about basically the British army gets trapped between the Nazis and the ocean. And they can't get across because there's German submarines, and they keep sending troop transports to try and get the troops out of France back to England. And every time they would load up a boat, the Germans would sink it and kill thousands of people. And so they had to basically like, they ended up getting a bunch of fishing boats and stuff like that, like, and moving the entire British and French army out of France on fishing boats, like across the English Channel, because you can't sink a fishing boat with a submarine. It's too small. It's hard to target a fishing boat with a torpedo. And so they basically had to do a mass evacuation. But if they hadn't been able to do that, Germany would have taken everything within about 2 months, and the war would have been over, and there would have been nothing to do about it. They would have defeated the entire British army. They would have just killed everybody. There would be no resistance left in France. It was really crazy how impressive this was. The Germans' tanks and artillery and infantry quickly break through all the defenses again, and Belgium and the Netherlands basically surrender entirely. Like more than 300,000 British troops are evacuated from Dunkirk across the English Channel, and by June 17th, so they started in May. By June 14th, Paris had fallen. Now remember, in World War I, that war lasted for 7 years, and they never got within 30 miles of Paris. The Germans set out to try and take Paris in World War I and got stopped with the Western Front and the trench warfare and all that stuff. The Germans said, that ain't happening this time. They took Paris in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. What took them 7 years to never accomplish. 6 weeks, it was done. Everybody's like, wow, Hitler said he was going to do it, and now he did. So, yay, that guy, right? So, yeah. Then Hitler goes with his boys, and he goes and takes his picture, which, Yeah, the dude, like, this would absolutely have been Hitler's Facebook profile picture. Like, he would have put this on Instagram for sure. Yeah, me and the boys sitting here at the Eiffel Tower. Say cheese, everybody. Swiss cheese, yeah. And so, basically, Britain is the only country in Europe that's basically left that hasn't been taken over. The Spanish kind of worked out a deal with the Nazis. The Spanish were kind of pro-Nazi. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. They definitely supported the Nazis. And the Nazis never invaded them. So, yeah. Huh? Yeah. Yeah. They saw him as a very strict conservative, kind of. But they basically, it's pretty crazy. France signs an agreement with Germany on June 22nd that says that Germany is going to occupy the northern France and help them, and that's going to allow them to launch attacks on Great Britain and all the way down to the coast of Spain. And the French government is able to basically establish a little bit of a resistance government in the southern part of France, but basically it's completely useless. I mean, they arrest all the military, everybody else. I mean, it's completely useless to try and resist against the Germans. And now it's just the Germans trying to just level the island of Great Britain. Like, they're just going to try and level it. They're going to kill everybody that they can. And so he wants to conquer them, but the British have a lot of airplanes, but the German Air Force is just far superior, and they're just basically holding on. Now, Hitler wants to invade Great Britain, but the problem is that you have to wipe out all resistance in the sea and in the air before you can actually try to invade. He's never really able to do that. And so he postpones. He was going to do it in 1940, and he's like, no, we'll wait till the spring. And so now he's just sitting there. He's like, well, I can't invade Britain. What am I going to do? Well, he's crazy. So he's like, I need to do something. And he gets antsy. He's like, I know what I'll do. I'll pick a fight with Russia. Now, this dude had a really good thing going here. If he had just waited, you know, he'd have been fine, but he just couldn't do that because he's an idiot. Now, he does go on to start just bombarding Great Britain. The Luftwaffe, which is the German Air Force, they begin repeated bombing raids on British towns and cities. It's known as the Blitz. They're trying to bomb them into submission, but the British are very resilient. And so they actually are able to come up with like a good spy network that's going to give them heads up when they're coming. You have the innovation of radar that comes about where now you can see when the planes are going to take off, and you can make a siren and people can hide, and you're going to really lower the civilian casualties. But understand, the Germans were not bombing military targets. They were just bombing the city indiscriminately. They wanted to kill every person on the British Isles, like everybody, until they just gave up. Like, on the first day of bombing, the Germans claimed that they dropped like 337 tons of bombs on Great Britain. Like, they're bombing the crap out of them. And this went on and more and more and more. And again, Hitler ends up, you know, kind of underestimating the will and the courage of the British people. They're not going to just be, you know, go into submission and be like, oh, they're not French. You know what I mean? They're not going to be like, oh, we're just going to give up. Britain's not like that, right? The French were just like, we will give up very quickly. You may have our whole country. And the British are like, no. It was really awesome, actually. Good for you, Britain. But you end up with basically the town of London looking like this. Pretty much the whole town. But again, the British don't give up, and Hitler gets pissed off and mad, and he starts losing his mind. He's like, why won't they give up? I need to defeat somebody. And then he's like, Russia, which is a terrible mistake. Oh my gosh, what an idiot. So yeah, then he's going to invade Russia because he's stupid. So he goes, hey, let's just go ahead and invade Russia. June 22nd, he begins Operation Barbarossa. He's going to betray Stalin. He ignores the promises that he made with the Soviet Union. And so he sends 3 million soldiers into the Soviet Union. 150 divisions of tanks. They go across the eastern frontier into Russia. And it's a massive invasion. Now, the problem is they have to travel like 2,000 miles. And by this point, German combat effectiveness had basically reached its peak. They were really well trained. They had great doctrine and equipment and technology. And they were probably the strongest army in all of human history ever. Point blank, period. I mean, unbelievable. But it's a very crucial turning point because nobody ever invades Russia because it's stupid. Literally, like, the only people that have ever successfully invaded Russia was like Genghis Khan. Everybody else has failed. Everybody. Like, it's kind of unbelievable. And of course, Nazi Germany is going to now be forced to fight a two-front war, where you're fighting on the Eastern Front and the Western Front, and that's really hard to do. You're going to be sandwiched between two battlefields. You can see here that Germany had basically taken everything. Yeah, everything. Look at that map.
What's that one in the middle?
Oh, that's Switzerland. They're always neutral.
Why didn't you just
Huh?
left them? Why would they just take it?
Because they have all the gold. Haven't you ever heard of like Swiss banks?
Yeah.
They're like neutral in every way, shape, or form. Like, they don't extradite people anywhere. They don't, like, you cannot get anybody's bank information from Switzerland. People that have like Swiss bank accounts, they like use that to hide money so they don't have to pay taxes on it, because the Swiss are like, that's like their big thing, like money privacy. That's like their number one thing. And they are super, super, like, but they did banking for the Nazis and for everybody else too. Like, they play both sides. Yeah. So they're neutral. So you got to have somebody that's the money man, you know what I mean? And it's Switzerland. So, yeah, if you look at this, I mean, it's pretty crazy. The Nazis have basically just taken all of Europe except for, you know, like I said, England and I guess Iceland, and then everything else. Yeah, I don't know how Sweden got out of that. They did. And then Spain, which, again, was neutral but supported the Nazis. And so now, though, you've opened up this entire battlefront over here, okay? Now, Russia's going to defend their homeland very strongly. The German army gets deep into Soviet territory. The tanks are especially effective at, you know, circling large Soviet forces, and you have, you know, major victories for the Germans, and you basically get to about 2/3 of the distance to Moscow and Leningrad, which are the two biggest Soviet cities. But they get all the way about 2/3 to Moscow, and they get to Leningrad, and it becomes a major problem with German logistics. They start to unravel because you have two major factors here. Trying to capture Russia, it's so big, and to get supplies from one army to the other when you have to get so far apart is really hard. Okay, you can't just be like, hey, you know, if you look at this map here, if you're fighting in France and you need to get troops, or you need to get troops from like Poland to France, 200 miles, you can do that in like a week or less if you give them meth like he was, right? He'd give them that meth and be like, it's time for a 20-mile march, and they'd be like, yeah, and they'd be all snorted up on coke and meth, and they was giving them like steroids, so they were freaking crushing it, bro. But it's really hard. It's a ridiculously large. You're stretched way too thin. You're easier to pick off. And then the other factor is the winter sets in. You know, we get to September of 1941. The Germans have enough supplies to renew their offensive. And they get to Kiev in September, and you know, they keep moving through. They get like 600,000 prisoners of war in Kiev, and more Russians are dying, and it's crazy how many Russians the Nazis kill. But again, the weather is going to intervene. Heavy rains at the end of September turn the roads into sludge. It's hard to move supplies even more because of the sludge and the mud. The German tanks are not going to last very long in that mud. And then winter sets in, and Russian winters are cold and bitter. I mean, you're too thin, you're stretched out, the winter sets in, they don't have any winter clothing. They thought that they were going to do to Russia what they did to France and be done in 6 weeks. So they're like, September, we'll be done by October. When we take over Russia, we'll resupply and have all our winter clothes. Now they're fighting a war in the winter with no winter clothes. You know, they say, hey, you know, his generals are like, hey, this is a bad idea. This is not working out well. Hitler says, I don't care. You keep going. They get to December. The army is really doing terrible. I believe that at one city, I believe it was in Stalingrad, they estimate that it was Leningrad. In the Battle of Leningrad, they estimate that over 1.5 million Soviet soldiers died defending one city in about 4 months. One city. 1.5 million Soviet soldiers died, or more. Like something like 300, 400,000 Germans. Like crazy numbers, like unbelievable numbers. And you had these, and so the Germans start realizing like, oh, this was bad. And they start to retreat, which only makes it worse because as they retreat, the Russians just have the field day on them. And so, yeah, it's going to end up being bad. Now, you also end up with people like Himmler and these people. We know about the Holocaust. They put people, POW camps for the Soviets. I know we talk about the Jewish Holocaust that kills like 6 million or whatever. The Russians, they killed 5 or 6 million Russians in the same way in concentration camps for the Russians. As they would conquer them, they'd just put them in concentration camps and starve them to death and work them to death. You're talking millions of people. And so, the numbers are kind of crazy. You end up with about, I think the total World War II numbers are like 60 million dead. Something crazy. Like unbelievable. And so, yeah, the Nazis made a big mistake on that, and that's going to eventually lead to their downfall because they spent so much effort pouring into Russia that it's not gonna play out very well for them. Okay. Where are we at here? Dadgum. Let me see.